They called it the land of builders. From the ashes of revolution and civil war, the Soviet Union rose with one obsession: construction. Not only construction of factories and cities, but of an entire new world. Every brick, every beam of steel, every block of concrete carried the weight of ideology. This was not just about shelter or industry. It was about proving that socialism could reshape reality itself. In the 1920s, the USSR was still a poor, largely rural country. Villages stretched endlessly, but modern cities were rare. Yet, within just a few decades, the Soviet leadership promised to build the future. Their slogan was clear: "We are building communism." And so the age of monumental construction began. First came the factories. Giant plants for steel, coal, and machinery appeared in places where, days before, there had only been empty fields. Workers called them cities of smoke and fire. They worked day and night, sometimes sleeping right on the ground beside unfinished walls, driven by hunger and propaganda. These were not just industrial projects, they were temples to the new Soviet order. But behind the pride lay sacrifice. Whole villages were uprooted. Families sent thousands of miles away to work in conditions so harsh that survival itself became an achievement. Soviet construction often relied not only on volunteers, but also on prisoners, millions of them. From the icy wastes of Siberia to the deserts of Central Asia, the hands of prisoners carved the foundations of Soviet progress. Consider the Moscow metro. To the outside world, it was a marvel of design, an underground palace filled with marble columns, mosaics, and chandeliers. To the Soviet citizen, it was proof that communism could create beauty for everyone, not just the elite. But behind the glittering walls, thousands of workers labored in deadly conditions, some never leaving the tunnels alive. Official history remembers the triumph. Survivors remember the funerals. And then there was Magnitogorsk, the city built from nothing, on the edge of the Ural Mountains. Stalin declared it would become the heart of Soviet steel. Workers arrived by the tens of thousands, pitching tents in the snow, enduring hunger, disease, and exhaustion. Western visitors were shown the glowing furnaces, but not the mass graves. By the mid-1930s, Magnitogorsk stood as both a symbol of industrial might and a monument to human suffering. The Soviet Union did not build slowly. It built fast too fast. Entire neighborhoods sprang up overnight, with identical gray apartment blocks known as Khrushchevkas. These were not designed for comfort, but for efficiency. The goal was simple: give every Soviet family a roof, even if that roof leaked, even if the walls cracked. Millions of people moved from wooden huts into these concrete boxes. For many, it was paradise. For others, it was a cage. But perhaps the most haunting constructions of all were those hidden from the world. Deep in the forests, secret cities were built, closed towns dedicated to nuclear research, weapons testing, and military production. They did not appear on maps. Their names were classified. People who lived there could not speak of them to outsiders. To this day, some of these ghost cities remain, their crumbling buildings guarded by silence. Every Soviet building told two stories, one of glory, the other of pain. A dam across a mighty river meant electricity for millions, but also swallowed entire villages beneath its waters. A canal linking seas meant trade and transport, but also claimed the lives of prisoners who dug it with bare hands. And always, the propaganda machine told the people, "We are building the future. We are building greatness. We are building a world where everyone is equal." Yet behind the slogans were the scars: workers who froze in the snow, prisoners who collapsed under whips, children who grew up in orphanages next to half-finished factories. What was built in the USSR was not just physical, it was psychological. The endless gray apartments shaped the daily lives of generations. The colossal monuments shaped their beliefs. The secret facilities shaped their fears. To live in the Soviet Union was to inhabit a construction site of ideology itself. The Soviet Union was not only a land of factories and cities, it was a land of rivers that could be controlled, bent, and conquered. Stalin once said that nature itself must bow before socialism, and so the engineers began to redraw the map. One of the earliest and most infamous projects was the White Sea-Baltic Canal. Built in the early 1930s, it was meant to connect the Arctic Ocean to the heart of Russia, opening a new waterway for trade and war. But the truth behind its creation was darker. Over 100,000 prisoners from the Gulag carved the canal with picks, shovels, and their bare hands. They worked through winters where temperatures fell below -40. Food was scarce, rest was rare, and death was constant. Official propaganda celebrated the canal as a triumph. Photographs showed smiling workers, proud engineers, and Stalin himself inspecting the waters. But the canal was shallow, too narrow for most ships. It was less an achievement of engineering than an achievement of propaganda. What it truly represented was the willingness of the state to sacrifice countless lives for the illusion of progress. This pattern repeated across the Union. Massive dams rose along the Volga and Dnieper rivers, bringing electricity to millions of homes, flooding entire towns. Families watched as their churches, schools, and cemeteries disappeared beneath rising waters. They were given little choice: leave everything behind or drown with their memories. Then came the grand vision of canals linking seas: the Moscow-Volga Canal, the Volga-Don Canal, the Karakum Canal cutting across the deserts of Central Asia. Some of these projects succeeded, turning deserts into farmland and lighting up new cities. Others scarred the land, draining lakes and leaving behind wastelands of salt and dust. The dream of conquering nature reached its peak with the Siberian projects of the 1960s and 70s. Whole rivers were planned to be reverse diverted southward to irrigate the steppes. Engineers drew blue lines on maps as if the earth were clay to be molded. Some projects were started. Few were finished. The land resisted, nature resisted, and yet, millions of lives were spent trying to bend it. These canals and dams remain today monuments not just to Soviet power but to Soviet cruelty. Behind every bridge of steel lies the story of men who never returned home. Behind every reservoir lies the silence of villages that no longer exist. If the canals showed Soviet ambition to rule nature, the cities showed its desire to rule people. The Soviet Union was not content with slow growth. It wanted to build entire worlds overnight. In Moscow, skyscrapers known as the Seven Sisters rose like Gothic guardians, blending Stalinist grandeur with socialist pride. Their spires pierced the sky, symbols of victory after the Great Patriotic War. To stand before them was to feel the power of the state towering above you. Across the Union, entire cities were planned and built from scratch. Norilsk, carved from the Arctic tundra; Toliati, founded for car production; Akademgorodok, a city for science in the forests of Siberia. Each city served a purpose, each population molded to fit the plan. Life inside these new urban landscapes was efficient, controlled, and uniform. Gray concrete blocks stretched endlessly, housing millions. Privacy was rare. Conformity was expected, but some of the most important cities did not appear on maps. They were the secret cities, known only by code names like Arzyma 16 or Chelyabinsk 40. These places were hidden from the outside world. Behind their barbed wire, scientists worked on nuclear weapons, rockets, and biological research. Residents lived in silence, forbidden to tell relatives where they were. Children grew up in closed societies, never knowing that their hometowns officially did not exist. And then there were the monuments: colossal statues of Lenin, giant war memorials, endless parades through Red Square. Every structure was a message carved in stone. The state is eternal. The individual is nothing. Yet behind the marble and steel lay cracks. The apartments leaked. The factories polluted. The secret cities produced waste that poisoned rivers. Monuments crumbled faster than expected. The grand dream was not eternal, it was fragile, held together by fear. Today, the Soviet Union is gone, but what it built still remains. The canals still flow, though some are shallow and broken. The dams still stand, though their waters have drowned the memory of villages. The secret cities still exist, though their names have changed. For those who lived through it, every wall tells a story. Some remember the pride of moving into their first apartment, of seeing lights in homes that once had none. Others remember the funerals, the disappearances, the silence of graves unmarked by names. The legacy of Soviet construction is not just concrete and steel. It is memory. It is the paradox of glory and suffering bound together. The USSR wanted to prove that it could build the future, and it did build monuments, cities, canals, secrets. But in doing so, it's also built shadows that remain, whispering that progress achieved at the cost of humanity always leaves scars. And so, when we walk through abandoned factories, crumbling apartment blocks, or silent canals, we are not just walking through ruins. We are walking through history, a history where every brick carries to weights one of triumph and one of tragedy. The question is not only what they built, it is what was lost in the process.